The Star Citizen universe is often seen through the eyes of the political and military leaders, the governments, armies, and corporations that run the verse. However, other groups, those at the heart of smuggling, piracy, and other illicit acts, have an almost equal effect in the game. This is the story of some of those forces. The story of the gangs of Stanton. Welcome to Galactic Historian. This is a series where I break down the lore of space and sci-fi universes. If you enjoy this, just a reminder, please like the video and be sure to leave any questions or comments you have in the space below. This is honestly one of the most requested episodes I've done, as many people want to know more about the groups they're smuggling, murdering, and turning off comrades for. This is also one of the harder episodes to do research for, as a lot of the backstories of these groups aren't fully fleshed out in the game or have changed over time. As a result, this is more of a brief glimpse into the seedy underworld of Stanton rather than a deep dive. I hope to do a more exhaustive one further down the road though. Before we get started, it's important to differentiate between a gang and a syndicate. Both operate in Stanton, but practically a gang is much more akin to a street gang, while a syndicate is much more like a mafia. The gangs of the UEE are often multi-system, with chapters all over the verse, similar to outlaw biker gangs. Most have an affinity for thrash metal and punk lifestyle, living loud and being very visible in the public. They like loud music, violence, and reject most of the social norms of UEE society. They're a counterculture with large caliber weapons, so very similar to the classic cyberpunks of, well, the cyberpunk genre, but in space and embracing piracy over augmentation to show their counterculture roots. I've come up with the term pyropunk or pyropunk as a means to describe this movement, but feel free to give me your own answers in the comments below. Comparatively, syndicates are much more like a shadow corporations, staying quiet as possible and focusing on profit, not the thrill or the lifestyle of an outlaw. They operate in secret, and their sole mission is to gain power and influence. For now, let's get started with the most visible of the groups in Stanton, the gangs. They may be a Stanton-only pirate and smuggler gang that operate out of Grimheck Station and Yellow's Belt. Their name may be a reference to the Chinese Hulijing, the Korean Kumiho, or the Japanese Kitsune, female trickster fox spirits that bring chaos and misfortune wherever they go. It could also be a reference to the brutal weapon of torture called the Cat of Nine Tails, which was a beaded whip that was used as a means of punishment in the British Navy and Army. Either way, the reference would be spot on, given the brutal and tricky nature of the gang. The structure and leaders of the gang aren't well known. You have definitely encountered them in game, as they fly the blue and red ships which interdict you when you're traveling around the system. Most of their missions revolve around assassinations of competitors or security officers, and sometimes smuggling goods to one of their customers or their secret stash houses. They're probably most infamous for being the originators behind turning off comrades. They figured that if the local security couldn't see them, they can get away with a lot more murder and mayhem. Very fitting for the potential namesakes. The Dusters are similar to the Nine Tails in that they operate partially out of Grimheck Station, though their name may also be a reference to Daymar. Either way, they operate mostly out of the moons of Crusader. You rarely encounter them in the verse, but they often give similar missions to the Nine Tails. The most visible person involved with the Dusters is the mission giver, Rudo. Rudo acts as a go-between for them, giving missions out to players to do the dirty work of the Dusters. As a result, his missions are a good window into the soul of the Dusters. While he seems cheery and lighthearted, he always gives out the dirtiest of his jobs to the first-time contractors, usually taking a body which had been cut up by the Dusters and placed into several bio-waste boxes for you to get rid of. Though mostly he gives you missions around assassinating targets, sometimes security officers, and then retrieving what that target had stolen from the Dusters and giving it back to them. They also famously once threatened the pirate broadcaster Booty Call, as they took offense to something he had said about their relationship with another gang. That should give you a general idea of how this gang works. They're ruthless and savage. They're very protective of their reputation and won't hesitate to make you their enemy if you cross them. The Lowriders are an interesting gang. They're one of the newest generation of outlaws, with possibly many different chapters all over the verse. They're also the latest offshoot of the legendary Nova Riders, who have been terrorizing the verse for centuries. The Nova Riders were infamous for reportedly inventing space piracy. They came up with the idea of hitting a ship while it was in mid-flight. You see, up to that point, only the richest of the rich could afford their own ships, so gangs would just wait for ships to arrive at a station, show up with guns and masks, and take what they wanted. The Nova Riders changed that by getting their own ship and ambushing their targets mid-jump. Since then, every generation has taken up the mantle of Nova Riders in some way, shape, or form. Later generations of Nova Riders improved on the art of piracy. One pioneered using improvised jamming with loud gutter thrash music to drown out the distress calls of ships being attacked. Another iteration would plant gang members on ships who would then hijack and aid their friends as they would intercept the flight. They even forced the passengers and crew to strip naked before they fled, literally taking the clothes off of people's backs and slowing down any response from security forces. Unfortunately, the name was recently used in the popular game Arena Commander for all of their pirates. As a result, a lot more young, inexperienced outlaws have taken up the mantle, and thus causing some confusion. It could be that the Lowriders were once the actual Nova Riders who dropped the name after it became too what's called bouge-baggy for them. It could also be that they're a young crew that didn't want to be so mainstream as to call themselves the Nova Riders, but still wanted something similar in terms of recognition. Either way, they seem to be a new gang on the scene in Stanton. You've met them if you've ever done the mission to reclaim Security Point Correa in previous patches. These days, it seems they've been replaced by the Ninetails, but still offer some occasional missions around Stanton. Now, let's get started on the main syndicates of the Stanton system. There's no official name for this syndicate, but it has been revealed in audio files that Wallace Klim, Eddie Parr, and Michael Shaw work together to smuggle drugs all over the Stanton system. Their motivations are unclear, as Shaw is a freedom fighter on Lorville and possibly works with the rebel group Ex Malo Bonum, while Eddie Parr owns Wally's Bar on New Babbage, and Klim is a habitual drug user. It could be that the profit and disruption to order that their product causes may be enough for all three to work together. Many of the named drug labs you can find in Stanton are run by them: Paradise Cove, Jumptown, and the Orphanage, to name a few. They likely made a pretty profit during the Jumptown Wars, and have been riding high ever since. They tend to stay quiet, not really offering a lot of assassination missions, instead offering missions like limited drug runs, samples of their product to prospective buyers, or selling information. However, they're no longer alone in the business, and a new group has started to muscle their way onto their turf. The OTONI Group is a major syndicate of the Star Citizen universe, one of, if not the most powerful criminal organizations in the UEE. Founded by 3 orphans from Angeli in the mid-29th century, they now have their fingers in just about any and every criminal operation in human space. Their estimated wealth rivals that of Hurston Dynamics, ArcCorp, Crusader Industries, Microtech, Bering, and even Robert Space Industries. They have reportedly infiltrated every corporation in the verse, and even the government itself. What separates the OTONI Group from other syndicates is their franchisee system. Instead of muscling their way into a system and trying to establish control with the full force of their group, they insert a small recon force to use their reputation to help gain control of a system, and slowly take it over. These scout groups become franchisees, and the leaders of the group in that system. These new leaders then are given autonomy while coordinating with other groups to help maintain their multi-system presence. Recently, an OTONI group has started to take root in Stanton. Based out of the back alleys of ArcCorp, they are very particular about whom they hire for jobs. However, all of them require skill, patience, planning, and are incredibly dangerous. Their main point of contact, and possibly the leader of the Stanton branch of the OTONI, is Ticia Twitch Pacheco. Pacheco is a former employee of Blackjack Security, the group in charge of policing ArcCorp. After an accident on duty in which she suffered nerve damage, Blackjack fired her. Now she's working with a new OTONI on ArcCorp, possibly as a means to extract revenge on her former employer. One of the operations she sends you on is to disrupt the Klim Shah Par Syndicate by retrieving rare drugs before she calls in a tip to Blackjack. Another is to clear out guards and thaw some prisoners on a sabotaged transport. These prisoners are likely related to the OTONI Syndicate in some way, as she explicitly tells you to only revive those she requested. Since the Syndicate is very secretive, a separate transport will come in after you leave to recover the thawed prisoners. In both of these cases, your job requires timing, skill, and possibly a lot of violence, marking the OTONI as one of the most difficult and most rewarding groups to work for in Stanton. Those are the gangs and syndicates of the Stanton system, everything from chaos-loving punks to galaxy-spanning mafias, all vying to be top dog in the heart of capitalism in the UEE. If you plan on throwing in with these criminal agents of the verse, these may be your first contacts. So be wary of who you work for. Between the gangs and the syndicates going to war, you might just step into the wrong crosshairs. I want to thank you for watching, and I want to thank my Patreons on screen now for helping me make this content. If you enjoyed this, consider becoming a Patreon yourself. Just $5 a month can get you early access to videos, and even a long-requested podcast version of these videos for easier listening while driving or at work. What interests you about the gangs of the verse? What group do you find yourself most drawn to? Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, remember, ex Historia ad Astra.